Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Diane Griffin. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to get started by asking you to post in the chat. Let us know where you're here from. See about 85 people on so far. Oh, we got North Carolina. I see Maryland, Nigeria. Welcome. Got people all over. Utah, California. Maryland, famous for their crabs. If you have any questions at all, you can also ask a question by clicking on the question mark icon. We also suggest you close all other applications that use bandwidth or resources on your device. Got the grits and Raleigh. It's fun. If you're having any audio issues, refresh your browser, or if you're on a phone, you can use your phone by clicking the phone icon at the top of the screen. Pennsylvania. To disable pop-up alerts from the chat, you can click the checkbox at the top of the chat. If you're on a mobile device, turn off notifications in the Any Meeting Webinars mobile app setting. A lot of people from New England. For live captioning, closed captioning, and more tips, you can click on the link on the screen. Anybody who's joining us would love to know where you're coming from if you want to post in the chat. Got people from all over the world. Minnesota, Illinois, California. This is great. People are still flowing in, so we'll hang out here for a few minutes. There are some tips on the screen. Like we said, if you have any questions, you can click on the question mark icon. We do suggest you close all other applications. We'd also like to encourage you to join the WebEd community. It's absolutely free. Join EdWeb to access all the recordings, the CE quizzes, slides, and resources, and you'll also need to access it to get your CE certificates. You can join or log in on the link on the screen. Your CE certificate for this specific presentation can be downloaded from your webinar transcript page by the end of the next business day, so end of day tomorrow. We also invite you to join the Technology in Schools community to connect with other educators on the topic. Community members get access to discussions and recordings of past presentations. And there's a link there for you to access it. Our presentation today is called Leveraging Digital Communications to Ensure Students and Families Are First Day Ready. Presentation is brought to you by TeacherList. TeacherList helps families get first day ready. We do that by taking your paper back to school supply lists and turning them into online shoppable lists. You send us your lists, and once they're digitized, we'll send you a list to share with your school to share with families. We'll also share the list with our retail partners, including Target, Walmart, Staples, and others. They share the list on their websites so people can shop them, and also in store. The best part is when families view their lists online, they can order the entire list with just a click. You simply select the retailer that you want to purchase from, you click their button on the bottom of the list, and all of the items flow right into the cart on the retailer's site for a quick and easy checkout. Super simple, very convenient, and your parents will love it. And it's free for the schools and families. So we're very excited to be here today to sponsor this webinar. I have two speakers with me today. The first is Charles Field. He's CEO of School Family Media, the leading back to school company. We also have Dr. Karen Stern, who has over 20 years experience as a teacher and principal. She heads up content at School Status. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Charles to start off the presentation.
Hi, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for letting me speak with you today, and for Cara. Obviously, if you're on this call, you're already getting back to school, ready for back to school coming this summer. So I appreciate you looking forward to what's out there. We broke the presentation up into the first sort of aspect of the presentation is we're going to look at who today's parents are and what's going on in their mindsets. And then the second half of the presentation, we'll get into some tips and some expectations and how do we service those parents. So I think it's worth taking a step back and saying, what is the current psyche of parents, in particular as it relates to back to school? From studies that are out there, almost 60% of parents find back to school the most stressful time of year. There's also another 60% that lose sleep over back to school. And I think it's important for teachers, administrators, and other school folks to understand how traumatic this experience is for the parents and why it's so important to put such an emphasis on it. It is a chance to reset expectations with the parents for a new year. And so it's a really important time of year to make the parents comfortable, to make the students comfortable also, and to really sort of set the tone for a good quality year. I mean, just when you look at the studies, what parents are worried about is the cost of back to school. They're concerned about their child having good teachers. They're concerned about the the fact whether there's food. I'm just going to ask the other presenters to mute so we don't get any background noise. They're concerned about the food that they're being served. Obviously, safety has become a big concern at school, and also important to many parents is, will their children make friends? And I'm a parent of 3 young children, so I know a lot of these anxieties that parents have. So let's look at who the parents are today. There is a generational shift going on. We're shifting from parents who are in the Generation X timeframe to those parents who are the Gen Y or millennials. And it's a big wave of Gen Y children coming into the school system. In 2016, about 80% of kids born were to the Gen Y parents, and that number's only gone up since then. And those kids are now going into second grade. And so you're seeing this shift, particularly at the elementary and middle school, where you're shifting from the Gen X parents to the Gen Y parents. And that's really important to understand because these parents parent differently. First thing is, I think we all know this, most parents have 2 working families. 64% of parents are both parents are working. Or if it's a single parent, obviously that single parent is working too. The other thing that you hear from parents nowadays is that they're feeling rushed in their daily routines. And we at School Family Media, we do have a lot of conversation with parents through our different digital platforms. And we hear these things all the time about just how parenting has changed and how rushed and how intensive it feels for the parent. At the same time that they're feeling very rushed, the parents of today's parents are also putting a really high priority on a number of things. They really value the togetherness of their family. And it's not the historical norm at mealtime, but it's whenever they can make it work. We hear in the economy about people taking more trips and having experiences together. That's all part of this drive for togetherness as a family. Parents today value positivity. As opposed to sort of that classic authoritarian discipline. I know you guys all know this from your classroom experience, but it's real interesting to think about how these parents have shifted. Everything is scheduled. I'm totally a product of this. My wife and I have a shared calendar at home for all of our family and children events, and we do schedule free time. And it's really, that's part of this. Everybody feels this anxiety towards all the things going on in their lives, but if we didn't have a schedule, we'd probably forget things. Parents are very much focused on, are their kids super safe? It really, not that that's never. We've always had parents that are concerned about the safety of their children, but it's only escalated in a number of years, and especially with this group of today's parents. And on a very positive notes, dads are taking a much more active role in parenting and being involved in their school's education, and I think that's very positive. But I'm not sure all the norms of communication and the way that we interact with parents is as inclusive of those dads. Everything from the parent teacher groups all the way through to what comes from teachers and what comes from the schools. And then we also have to remember that parents are sharing everything. Social media, it's omnipresent, and they're documenting their kids' lives. They're asking you guys in the classroom to share pictures of what's going on, and that gets out there. Um, and as we mentioned, parents are busier, but they have this really intense focus on spending more time with their children. And so that's, what all falls under that concept of intensive parenting. And so this has caused families and parents to have expectations that have changed over the years. And one of the things that we've noticed and the studies have shown, and this one's from the Walton Foundation, is that today's parents have extremely high expectations for schools and want their kids to provide, and they want those schools to provide their kids with core academic skills. But that's not enough. Parents are also asking schools to be their partners on raising their children. All these demands of two jobs and what's going on in their lives is causing the parents to look to the schools, to look to the school systems and say, hey, I want you to be a partner in this process with me of raising my children. Our ultimate goal is self sufficiency, independence, and being confident young adults. And so, you, as teachers, as school administrators, you have to understand that these are the expectations. This has changed dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years. And we have to understand that today's parents are asking for this. And we like to break this up into what are they asking for? Well, they're looking for knowledge and information. They're looking for flexibility. They're looking for help, and they're looking for convenience. So let's dig into each one of these topics. From a knowledge standpoint, it really is centered on how is my child doing? What are they struggling with? What's going well? How can I assist my child at home to make the child be more successful in the classroom? Um, you know, do we have the right tools? Does my child have the school supplies they need? Do they have the worksheets or whatever materials that they need to be actively participating? And I found, especially since COVID, that the ability to access the apps and log in it's gotten better than the initial wave of COVID, but it's part of the anxiety of can my children get to all the materials that they need because there's so many different things out there that they're supposed to be using, and that information doesn't always flow through to the parents so that they can help and troubleshoot. So when you think about communication to parents, you have to think about these questions that are in mind and what do they not know. There's also this ability, this question of flexibility. We're used to getting information in all sorts of different ways. So, do they have the right materials? Is it online? Is it provided through hard copies? Is it something that I'm going to need to print at home? Like all these complexities lead to the parents' anxiety, but for each parent, they want a different way to access this information. You have to account for that. And likewise with the communication, and we'll dig into this one a little bit in more detail later. But is it email? Is it phone? Is it text? Is it in person? Every parent acts and uses technology and communication channels in a different way, and unfortunately, that does fall upon the teachers and the school systems to set the tone for how they want to communicate, where they want to communicate, and also in probably multiple channels because every parent's a little bit different. Uh, and there's also this concept of help. Um, Parents want to know what's coming up next, what's happening now. You know, many parents are not looking out weeks upon weeks, although it's good to sort of learn what may be coming down the pipeline. But the immediacy of information on what do I have this week, what do I have tomorrow, what do I have in the next hour is very crucial as we think about all the demands on the time of parents. And then likewise, who can I go to when I have questions to ask? my children needed to sort of see somebody to get some extra support in school. Well, who do I go and ask for that? Do I go to the teacher? Do I have to go to the school staff? Is it the principal or administrative? Providing that information is something that parents are asking for when needed. It's not all the time, but when they need it, it becomes very important to them. And then lastly, parents want convenience. As you'll see as we get into the next section, everything in life has become in many ways more convenient, and it's caused us to want things in an easier way to access it. From accessing grades to having a parent teacher conference that you can do online to accessing your school supply lists to getting ready for back to school. How do you make this convenient for the parents? Because it's something with their busy schedules that they want. And the expectations of today's parent has changed on how they want to be communicated with. We do a lot of studies out there, and it really comes down to the foundational shift of where the generation of parents have come from. On the left, you have sort of the parents that are phasing out of the school system, and baby boomers are pretty much already out, except when they're filling in for a parent that's not present. But you have people that were digital immigrants. They didn't grow up with technologies as embedded in their lives as those on the right here, the Gen Y and the Gen Z. From day one, there was the internet, there was access to information, mobile has taken off, and they're just, it's embedded in the daily culture, and they're, what are called digital natives. And so as we think about the new parents, we have to raise the expectations of how we're communicating with them, because it's happening out there in the world, and they're expecting the schools and the school system and their teachers to be there with them. And, I'm sure we're all guilty of this, but the studies have shown that we're checking our phones over 150 times a day. Between Gen Y and Gen X, you got over 95% of people who own smartphones. The power in our phones, as everybody knows, is so much more powerful than the supercomputers that sent the space shuttles up back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. We have changed as a society, and we see the kids walking around with their heads in their phones. We see the parents walking down the streets with their heads in their phones. That's where we're getting our information, and that we really need to think about that on a daily basis. And that's led to this concept of instant gratification. Obviously, instant gratification has always been around, but the reality is people aren't willing to wait more than 2 seconds for a video to load on their phone. So if you're sending something out, is it that quick? That also means that grabbing someone's attention is that millisecond or minimal seconds to get their attention. And you have all these consumer companies that are meeting that need and actually driving us more towards this. Amazon with their next day delivery or the next hour delivery if you're in certain markets. Uber Eats, Instacart, Netflix. We can stream online now everything that we used to have to go down to a movie theater to watch. And on and on. We can buy a car and it gets delivered to us, and very quickly. All of this is part of this instant gratification, and it's led to impatience. And Gen Y said technology has made them more impatient than they were 5 years ago. I know it's true with me. If you think about it, when you have access to information, or you can Google and have a million, hundreds of responses of information that's correct within milliseconds of you asking the question, it starts to change your behavior. You stop memorizing things and you say, well, if I need it, I can go and look it up. It's more time efficient to do it that way. And there's pros and cons to that, and I won't get into that from a teaching perspective, but from a gratification perspective, parents want, and people want today to receive instant gratification. And just, this is a little bit of a rhetorical question, but to sort of set the mindset, what would you do today if you forgot your wallet? Would you go back and get it? I probably wouldn't. In fact, I don't carry a wallet. But what would I do today if I forgot my phone? I would stop anything I'm doing and I would go and look for it. And that's the reality. And so, I just want you to take away one thing from this presentation is that I want you to take away is how important it is to think mobile first. That is the prime way that parents are interacting with digital communication. It's not the only way, but it is the prime way. We've looked at our data on folks that have come to some of our sites, And we see between 75 and 85% of usage is all now through mobile devices. And I would give us a sort of a B minus or a B on our experience. I think it's great, but we could be even better thinking from a mobile first perspective. So another thing that we've seen is as we've been surveying, or we've gotten the studies that have surveyed parents and teachers, you see a little bit of a disconnect on communication. So, parents talk about a preferred communication method as instant communication, so calls, texts, or comments on assignments right away. And when you ask the same teachers, or when you ask teachers how they measure engagement, it's different. It's around appointments and conferences. It's not about how they're communicating. And so I think the point of raising this is to say we need to find a way to bridge this between what the parents are thinking and what the teachers are thinking, and bring that together, and realize that you can help drive that bridge. There's also effective barriers out there. Parents, it's the timeliness of information, it's the quality of information, and the clarity of information. And then on the other dichotomy of that is you have teachers that just have structural barriers. They either don't have the contact information for the parents, so it's hard for them to communicate, or maybe there's language issues and they don't have the ability, if they want to get something out timely, but they have to go and get it interpreted into a different language, then that makes it hard to deliver that on a timely manner. And so now you're treating families in a different way. And so all of these different things are coming up that we need to think about as teachers and as school administrators, in sort of interacting with parents, and thinking of the parents and the students first in your communication strategy. So Rachel, can you pop up the poll here? So if you guys could please answer this question. So which innovation has had a positive impact on your life? I'd just like to see from the audience here what's been the most impactful. That's real interesting. Online shopping is out to an early lead, 2-day delivery. So I don't want to bias the answers here. We seem to have settled in on a thing. So I'm going to share the vote percentages here with each of you guys. I think this shared it on your end, if I'm incorrect, but I'll say that the leader here was the online shopping 2-day delivery, with about 54%, if I caught that before it switched over here. So that's real interesting. I know it's in my household, everything that can be delivered is. I think the only thing that we don't do is essentially groceries. So I am well aware of the impact of that on the life in my household. So I'm very happy that Dr. Carr Stern from School Status was able to join us. And so I spent this time sort of looking at the parent, looking at their expectations and who they are. And she's going to now go into some steps about how do we bring this all together, and how do we have a communication strategy that works. So Cara, I'll hand this over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Charles. And I happen to be Gen X. So I recognize myself in all different kinds of ways in your slides. As the person with older children who are aging out, but as someone who's been a principal to many millennial parents. So I want to talk first a little bit about the big picture when we talk about school communications and first day readiness. So when we think about school communications, we think about information, but information is just a small picture. Really, the big picture is that school communications are about building relationships. And I would ask you to think about the phrase keeping in touch. Keeping in touch is a physical phrase. It's reciprocal. To stay in touch, two people have to be in relationship together. One person can't be in touch with someone alone. It's a two-way street. So, what we're talking about is staying in touch with parents and caregivers all year long, including summer, and using school communications as one vehicle for being in relationship with them and keeping them connected to the building. So, study after study after study proves the value of regular research. And amazingly, there's a single, simple, but powerful reason behind all of this improvement, and it's trust. The more parents hear from their child's teacher and principal, the more they feel in the know about what's happening with their child at school. The more in the know parents feel uh, about what's happening at school, the more involved in school life, the more they trust the adults in the building. And that's the key. The more parents trust the adults at school, the more they support their child's learning. And it's equally important for students from immigrant families as students whose parents attended the same school a generation back. And the way I've come to think of it is that family communication is as integral to a child's learning and development as choice of curriculum or instructional methods. And this really was confirmed for me by a report that just came out about learning outcomes in COVID. And the study showed that students who had the highest learning outcomes during COVID also had the highest levels of family trust in the school district. So, one critical entry point to student success is the concept of belongingness or school connectedness. School connectedness is the belief that you're welcome and that you're included in the community. It's the I in your district DEI plan, ensuring that everyone is included. And it's really an essential step in improving attendance and in reducing absenteeism. So if we want families to feel included, we have to remove barriers to participation. And that means our communications really have to tick all of those boxes on the green side. So let's talk about how we do and don't do that. So um, we've already established how critical it is to get information home to parents and caregivers. Um, and Charles really laid out beautifully how we really get our information. Most people are getting their input at all times from their phone. So, given these stats, what do you think is the percentage of parents who actually manage to put their hands on a flyer that goes home in a backpack? So my dad would say the answer is slim to none. The picture on the left gives you a good sense of how likely a parent would be to get any communication arriving home in a backpack. The picture on the right illustrates the ease with which a parent can access a digital newsletter. So when it comes to teaching and learning, we talk about reaching students where they are. Digital communications are about reaching parents where they are. This is just a little break for a chuckle. Now, Charles laid out all of the reasons that millennial families require digital communications. The other group that requires digital updates is multilingual or English learner families. In our public schools today, 20% of students speak a different language at home. And by 2025, 2 years, the number is going to grow to a quarter of all K 12 public school students in the US, which is 1 out of every 4 students. So, if parent communication is critical to student success, then parents who do not speak English at home have to be able to access classroom updates with the same ease as native English speaking parents. Updates without translation are a barrier to success for English learner students, and it's one that schools could easily remove. I also want to take a moment and speak about at risk families. So, middle class public school attending families are very attuned to the rhythms of the school year. They anticipate health forums, parent conferences, and report cards. They know how to work the system, who to reach out to when there's an issue, and how to advocate for their child. As more and more families fall into the at risk category, however, especially post pandemic, it's important to move away from the assumption that most folks just know how to do school. When poverty, stress, violence, hunger, or unemployment strike a family, basic systems break down. Not completing health forms can be a reason a child doesn't come to school. Hourly work can be the reason a parent doesn't come to a conference day. Falling behind and feeling lost academically and stressed socially will follow, and many caregivers don't know where to turn for help. Children living in poverty have the highest absenteeism and dropout rates, and 83% of incarcerated persons are high school dropouts. So arguably, engaging this group is our most important task, and that means removing every barrier we possibly can. And a district or a building that anticipates this, that builds safeguards into systems of communications for exactly these reasons, and has other options for parents who can't show up in person, is a district where families feel supported. And families who feel supported send their children to school. So, what does a successful school communication plan look like? I like to think of it as a funnel. The top of the funnel starts at the district level. Building school connectedness and fostering a culture of achievement has to start at the top with the district leader. It's important for parents and caregivers to see the district leader promoting community values like equity, engagement, academic success, not to mention attendance, and it's essential for setting the tone for faculty and other administration. And of course, everyone must be able to access it. Next comes building leadership. When building leaders communicate with families on a weekly basis, they're accomplishing multiple things at once. They're modeling communication for faculty, they're setting the tone for families, they're establishing the school's mission and values, and they're giving families an opportunity to get to know them as educators and leaders. Weekly communications from the principal are a great way to establish the value of attendance and to communicate procedures. And then there's the classroom update. A key ingredient to regular outreach, a key ingredient to student success is regular outreach from the classroom or homeroom teacher or advisor. Like I said before, the more home adults know what's happening in school, the more supportive they are of their child's teachers. And the thing that I know now that I didn't know when I was a principal is that parent communication is really an instructional decision. And parent relationships are inextricable from student success in school. So if a teacher is not actively working on keeping parents informed, they're not teaching as effectively as they want to be. So what do you put in those updates? During the school year, you want to communicate basics like classroom and homework policies, assignments and due dates, reminders about upcoming events that are helpful for busy adults leading stressful lives. You can suggest ask your child about questions, which is a great way to help parents and caregivers connect with their children. Sharing a parenting resource communicates your awareness of the challenging job of raising a child. Sharing your contact info and the names and contact info of counselors reinforces that folks are on hand to help. Most importantly, celebrate students for being in school. And when this update arrives week in and week out at the same time, parents begin to anticipate it. And this type of communication is a building block of strong homeschool relationships. Once students have left you for the summer, you can continue to be in communication. Maybe you're not sending a weekly update, maybe it's bi-weekly. Maybe you're sharing more about your summer activities, what you're reading, what your gardening is looking like, what your pet is up to. But the important thing is that you're maintaining a connection between family and building. You're allowing the relationship to stay the relationship, so that when students return to school, even if they're moving to a new teacher, they know that there is someone there who cares about them, who has been paying attention to their progress all through the year. At the bottom of the funnel, but still really important, is the marriage of data and communication. It's really not enough to send off our communications and hope for the best. We have to examine the response. We need to understand which parents and caregivers are engaging and which aren't, and whether that aligns with attendance data. This helps us to determine where we need to focus to get better results and where we're having success so we can duplicate it. When data shows a pattern that's problematic, it's time for one-to-one outreach. This can happen by way of a text message or a phone call. The important thing is that this outreach is personal, friendly, positive. Even if the pattern persists and further interventions are required, maintaining a supportive and a caring tone rather than a punitive one will be more effective in encouraging the change you hope to see. I like to recommend aiming for a ratio of 4-to-1, positive to negative. Intensify positive interactions in order to maintain supportive relationships and school connectedness. Okay, so I've mostly been talking about why to communicate. I'd like to, and what to communicate. I'd like to spend a little time talking about what those communications should look like. So when something feels like you, it's more enjoyable to create, and that enjoyment is communicated to families. However, that said, I really want you to think about sort of some of the hard and fast rules that being a digital population means. For starters, and this is what Charles said was his number one takeaway, was think mobile. I want you always to imagine the people you're communicating with on their phones. What they see first is the information that sticks. Then they scroll. So you want to make your newsletter or your update or your email easy to skim. If it doesn't look easy to skim, guess what? People aren't going to read it. So how do we do that? We don't write paragraphs. We think the paragraph is to my update what the dinosaur is to Earth, extinct or a killer. Here's a good way to know if you're hitting the mark with your update. Before you send it out, send yourself a test. Then read that test on your phone. If you find yourself like kind of glazing over, not actually reading, it means that your update is too long. You want to go back, edit it down, and try again. When you can comfortably read your own update on your phone, then it's ready for busy parents. Then you want to post your updates everywhere your readers might be. Like, here's an example of one district that posted their weekly update on Facebook, on Twitter, on the homepage of their website. You can also send it out through your school's mass notification system. So, sorry, I just lost myself. This slide somehow got into the wrong place. I meant it to be up before when I was talking about classroom updates. But in the summer, when you are thinking about welcoming students back to your classroom, one way that you really can ease their back to school jitters and nervousness is to send out some kind of meet the teacher newsletter, update, email that is like extending a hand. It will put families at ease. It will let them know what to expect on the first day. It is like the opening of the relationship. You can think of it like in the old days when you used to make a family visit before school started. This is in place of the home visit. But it's an important way to help families and students be first day ready. And again, I talked a little bit about using data to improve, but I want to just double back to say that good communication is in partnership, in lockstep with data. When data says things aren't working, you want to look for ways to improve and you want to reach out. And this is my summary slide of what I've had to say. And I am, with this, going to turn it back over to Charles. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Stern. I really appreciate that. And I want to just extend some of the things that you mentioned here and provide some additional sort of practical things to think of at back to school time, and also reemphasize a couple of the elements that you spoke of during your part of the presentation. Uh, you know, we talk about sort of back to school central pages or classroom pages. How do you, I mean, you have that back to school introduction of you as a teacher to your class. Well, also putting all the information into one place. Oftentimes this can be done at the district level. What are all the things you need for back to school, and make that easy to find on a school website. But this also can be taken all the way down to the classroom level. And is this a place where you bring your students into your classroom and you essentially begin that relationship and that connection before school starts, either with the parents or with the students? And so think about what you could do from that perspective to be bringing the information together and have that initial introduction to parents at the beginning of the school year. One element of that is school supply lists. Is it a PDF that gets distributed around, or is it a digital list that's shoppable and convenient? Those are just one other thing that you can do to make life easier for your parents. Um, Thinking the mobile first. I'm coming back to this because it's such an important thing. Thinking, again, what does it look like on a mobile device? What is that experience? And just going forward to that is like, reiterating Dr. Stern's point about testing the experience and understanding what it's like from a user perspective. And unfortunately, I always pick on my own school district and school in this part of the presentation, but it's indicative of what's out there. Here's an experience. This is an update from a Seesaw application that I get almost daily. This is an old image, but it tells me nothing. So if I want to go and find information as a parent, these subject lines don't tell me anything. And I know these are automatic updates that come from the application, but how is that helpful to me other than clogging up my email device? And yes, I will click through to it. But even then, the first thing that happens on the left here is you're brought to a page that just says, oh, if you want to see something, you have to go and click into the application. So now I've had to open an email. Now I've had to click on a link in an email to get to that information that was trying to be shared. And in this case, it's for young children and it was pictures. Well, that's, almost 3 steps to get where I want to go. And we talk about this instant gratification, that's too much. On the right is an example of a district message from my school district. It's paragraphs upon paragraph, very not easy to read. There are links through to other information, but I don't think that this application is tracking what the users are reading and are they getting the data back on it. And just some other examples, and this I know is getting a little busy. In the middle is my school newsletter. Well, again, I have to click through to go and read it. Well, that's an extra step. And then on the right, when I do get to the newsletter, the first half of it has information that's consistent from newsletter to newsletter, has the principal's name, and I probably should have hidden that. But I have to scroll down to get to the information that they want me to read. Obviously, if I need the language interpretation, that's important. That is here. But these are the top of the email message and is all the same thing every week to week to week. And so think about the sizing of your images. Where do you see the content? What is that headline image that you want to get and what you want to get across? And Dr. Stern brought up many of those points. I want to get us to the question and answers. I've seen a lot come through, and Diane, if you can moderate us from that perspective. But really want to thank all of you guys for listening. I want to remind everybody about Mobile First, and also remind people, I think, the structure of communication and realizing that that's part of an overall touch point in the community is very important to think about, and how digital can help you with many things. So Diane, what questions should we bring up to the group?
We do have a few questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, you can click on the question mark up there and submit one. One that just came in over the chat, but also through the questions, which is a great one, is how can we advocate for bullet points and shorter newsletters when our employer is set on paragraphs, 6 pages of notes?
Well, you can ask them to come listen to this presentation. Dr.
Yeah,
Stern,
I think it's a really good. I think it's a great question, and I think I would if you're comfortable, if it's a reasonable thing to do, is to sit with them and actually scroll through one of those 6 pages of paragraphs on a phone. And say, our parents are not going to read this. Take it and maybe do an experiment yourself of turning it into something that is shorter, with headers and bullets, that's much more readable, and ask if you can give it a try and see what the response is.
Thank you.
And I would add to that, if there's a way to A/B test that, where you can, and then measure the data on who reads it, and based off the different versions, that's a possible thing to do. Segment your audience. Do one classroom one way and another classroom another way, or do the same classroom and just split it up, and then go back to your administrator. Hey, here's the data points. The ones where I did it like this, I get a 10% better open rate, and I get a click-through rate of 50% better, and then show that data and bring the information back. So
yeah, it's a great idea.
Thank you. There was also a question going through the chat about different tools that you can use in the schools to communicate. I saw Class Dojo, Google Classroom, straight up email. Do you have any other suggestions, or does anybody in the chat want to share what tools they're using while Kara and Charles talk?
I mean, for me, I work at a company that has some different tools. One of them is S'more newsletters, which are very easy to use and translatable and visual, and fun because you can embed video and photographs. And I, showed some examples on some of the slides. And then School Status is both a data and communications platform for being able to be in communication with parents via text and via phone call and video chat. Everything is translated automatically into the parent's preferred language, and all the data about a student is on a screen right in front of you. So those are some tools that I know about.
Yeah, and the SIS system, PowerSchool, has some embedded modules for communications. You have Remind as a platform that's out there. Class Dojo was mentioned. You have Class Tag. There's a number out there. I think the thing that you should keep in mind, though, is that parents are being overwhelmed with the number of applications and different things that they have to either download or log into. So if there is some consistency on what your district or your school has decided to use, that can relieve some stress from the parent's perspective if it's one common application used as opposed to having a one-off application that they're using just for your classroom. And maybe it doesn't have all the features, but it's one common system and it's one pattern of experience that they have, and that just makes it easier to use. So there's that trade-off between having the perfect application versus having many different applications. So.
Right, absolutely. As a parent, you don't want to have to learn a new system every single year. You want to learn your system once and then have it be consistent from year to year to year as your children move through the grades.
Thank you. We have one more question. I'm going to give this one to you, Charles, since it's about the teacher list solution. It says, do you fill supply lists for students that are homeschooling? I'm with a public homeschool charter school. And the second part of the question is, does the ordering system integrate with a Procurify system?
Okay, so teacher lists will digitize any list that's out there, whether it's homeschool or public school or private school or Catholic or religious school. We're agnostic to where the list comes from. As long as we can set up the school and the system, it can be built. So, the one thing that's worth noting is that teacher list doesn't actually fulfill the list or procure the items. What it does is it digitizes the list and then connects the list to all the major retailers so that a parent can go and purchase that list with one click from, as we said at the beginning, Walmart, Target, Staples, Walgreens, etc. So it's really about building a digital and more convenient experience. So I think that last part of that was whether teacher list connects into the procurement system, and the answer is it does not. We do have another part of our business that can work with districts and schools if they want to procure either goods or kits on a direct sort of procurement business, and that is something that School Family Media has a part of our business that can help with. So.
Thank you very much. That was our final question. I do have a couple of reminders, or actually, sorry, we can play the video first. And just a reminder to join the EdWeb community. You'll need to join on to get your certificate for the day. You can access all the recordings, the quizzes, and the slides, but you will need it to get your certificate, which should be available by the end of the day tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.